Okay, let's go ahead and get started. It's slowed down on the attendance growing. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our All Things TEI webinar. Our whole Eduphoria team is here. Eduphoria Assessment Literacy Team. We have Ed Cunningham with us, Jenny Strack with us, Emily Cram with us, Tara Whedon, and I'm Jason Martinez. We are recording this webinar as we always do. All registered participants, whether they are here or not, will receive a link to the recording approximately 24 hours after the webinar. Also, all past webinars are available in our online help and on our YouTube channel. So if you miss any webinar, even though you may not be registered, you can always go find them there. So please do that. During this webinar, if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A window, and we will either address them with a written response. Someone on the team will try to get to them, or in some cases verbally, if it's something that we think would be applicable to all. Please keep those questions related to the webinar topics that you see here on the screen in our agenda. Also, in addition to that, we're going to have some links shared throughout the webinar to some resources, both in our online help and other things. Those links will be posted in the Q&A toward the end of the webinar. And also this presentation that you're going to see us go through will also be shared out as well. So any links and the presentation will be available to all of you guys that will come as part of the follow-up emails. And then any other follow-up additional help questions needed, as always, please email training@eduphoria.net. And we will try to help you out as much as we can. We're very excited about today's webinar and happy to be with you. This is our agenda. We're going to start with some intros to the TEIs and then move into some planning that we're doing to support those kinds of things. Talk about some new item bank stuff that you'll see. The item bank interface is changing completely. We're excited about that. And then we're going to talk about some things that you can currently do with our constructed responses that some of you out there may or may not be aware of. We're excited to share those things and then obviously talk about some things coming soon. So a lot to do on today's webinar, and we'll go ahead and get started. And I believe Emily is going to work with our TEIs.
All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction. If you're kind of saying, what is TEI as a new acronym? That's okay. So the new information related to TEIs basically says that in House Bill 3906, this was established in the last legislative session. And this specific bill, it does have multiple parts associated with it. And we're, of course, only going to speak to the part that really influences assessment today. But this first link that you'll receive later on takes you to the TEA website where you can gain all the insights on House Bill 3906 related to our topic. So we wanted to make sure that we had that in there for you to reference. But again, today we're going to specifically speak to the element of it that talks specifically about the STAAR assessment and saying that no more than 75% of the assessment can be multiple choice questions moving forward in the future. This will start occurring in the 2022-2023 school year. 25% of each STAAR assessment will have to include question types that are being referred to as technology enhanced items. So on this screen right here, I have just a quick little screenshot of what TEA has put together. These are some items that are under consideration. I'm going to go ahead and stress that they are still under consideration moving forward. So these would be some of the alternate question types that we could begin seeing in field testing pretty soon, but officially in that 2022 school year. So with that being said, we definitely want to address this and make sure that we cover any questions that you have related to how is Eduphoria going to respond to this. And that is our next slide, really. What is Eduphoria's plan? So we want to really reiterate the main message there that we've got your back. We have you covered. We're thinking through this from every element. We do have a support article that is again linked here, and it gives you some of that foundational information. At the bottom of our support article, it also gives you what TEA has put together as some sample items for different content areas for you to look through and kind of get a good feel as to what's being presented so far. And we're here to really show you what's in progress right now is going to be the highlight of today. What are we working on right now? And then what are some next steps? So that article is a great place for you to bookmark, to refer back to. Make sure that you're checking our emails as well, because we're going to provide you up-to-date information on every establishment that we have made in this process of creating TEIs for you to utilize. All right, so we can start. I'm going to kick it off to Tara. Tara's going to walk us through the foundation of getting ready for TEIs, which was the flipping of our item bank, and we've been calling it facelift. We gave it a facelift, but we made sure that it's ready to go to support those TEI question types when they're available, and that was the first project. So I will go ahead and hand it over to Tara and let her talk about that.
Thank you, Emily. Yes, we are super excited to share a little bit about what's been going on behind the scenes to prepare Aware for these technology enhanced items that will be coming. Next slide. So we are currently working to update the item bank on the item bank tab in Aware.
When you build an assessment and search item bank, standards will show a color-coded label. As a test author, when you access the item bank, all of the filters will be collapsed for easy access. The item bank with the highest volume of questions will be visible. From the top of the page, you may select another available item bank to search.
In previous iterations of the item bank, in order to view one item from your item bank, you had to select View Entire Course Bank or a single standard. There were no additional ways to narrow your results, and refreshing your screen meant you returned to square one.
Now, the item bank mirrors what you already have available in test authoring. You will be able to quickly access and filter items, including the ability to quickly navigate between your available item banks. When you are ready to create items, you will simply click Add Local Item. Look familiar? You can write your item or resource, include keywords, and set security for your new question.
All new items will be required to have a primary standard. The My Questions and Resources folder will allow specialists to further develop a local item bank.
Once you select Add Local Item, you will designate a course. Now you are in a familiar space to construct a question type or resource, assign keywords, and enable question access through a security setting.
So with this update, you will be able to filter through questions. It's going to mirror what you see as a test author on the Assessments tab. And you're going to have just more simplistic processes for creating local items for a local item bank and approving those. So some things will remain the same and be familiar to you, and then other things will be updated to be familiar from that test authoring experience. At the end of this webinar, we'll make sure you know how to subscribe to our newsletters so that you can stay up to date with our release notes as these changes are made available to you. And now we'll go ahead and start talking about the bulk of this afternoon's topic. I think we can all agree, at least all of us here at Eduphoria definitely agree, that students benefit from opportunities to practice various modalities of writing. Sometimes, we get stuck in a rut and maybe we focus on one type of writing. So we really wanted to give you some options today of what can writing look like from a varied assessment standpoint. So our first example this afternoon probably looks familiar to some of you educators. We have Mrs. Lee, and she is wanting her students to practice an expository composition that's going to be scored with a STAAR grade 7 writing rubric. Notice here, as she is building this assessment, she will be able to set a word count limit for her students. So as they are writing, they will be able to see how many words they have written out of the total number. One thing we wanted to focus on here is if students exceed that limit, we want them to still capture what they are trying to communicate. So they will not be forced to stop at that word count. However, when you go to score them in the enter answer screen, you will be able to see how many words they actually used. If students exceed the word limit recommendation that was made, they will see that pop up in red. So they will have some type of notification that they exceeded that word count. And then coming soon, there will be a report that you will be able to print the constructed response answers. And in that area will be your second place where you can see how many words the student actually used when composing their response.
All right. So we're also going to cover some things that are not new from a software standpoint, but also maybe new ways for you to use some question types, especially with online testing and all that's going on around. And we're going to start here with this multi-part or evidence-based student response. It also may be called evidence-based selected response items. But essentially what this is it's got a question that's in here, a math question, in as a resource, and the teacher is going to want the student to show how they plan to solve this problem. And the first question, like referencing this resource, and then we're going to move to actually solving the question. And so the student will go in, and this is a numeric response. So that's why it doesn't say selected response for us, because you could use it for a numeric response question or a selected response type question. And so you see the student will then answer, and then on the next question, explain what they did. So these items can be used currently with our current, we have several districts that are doing this. It's a great way for teachers to check for deeper understanding with students. And we definitely encourage this kind of usage out there, especially with online testing going on right now. And as we said, if you need any help or how to design this or question weighting questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to any of us.
So I added this particular question type. It's a very informal writing type of question that allows you that formative evaluation of what students can recall on the spot. And so this type of question is great for assessing foundational skills very early on in the instructional cycle. You can gather just basic recall information very quickly by using this type of question. So you're asking them to identify 3 things. And as you might have noticed from previous screenshots, students now have the ability to, or will now have the ability to underline, bold, highlight. So you have some editing features in that constructed response space for students. So they can do more now than just type, which is really great. And so utilizing those things like bold and underlined and italics in that space does a couple of things. It makes it very easy for you as the teacher to scan and grade for correct answers within those sentences. But it also kind of forces the students to focus in on exactly what they're being asked to recall and self-assess maybe gaps in their knowledge. And so again, this is a really quick kind of formative check-in. I've taught these things on Monday and Tuesday. It's Wednesday now. I want to know, what they can recall without the benefit of having it in a multiple choice question and seeing the words. So this is what they can pull out of their own brain on the spot. And then I know where they're at with it before we move to more advanced applications of this knowledge in our instruction.
All right, thanks, Jenny. So as we get into the next example here, I want to kind of draw attention to how with each example, our constructed response question types using the exact same test authoring software for all other tests, using the exact same like scoring rules that have been there for a long time, options to link to resources, which you've seen in several of these examples. We're moving from imitate STAAR, which is a valuable practice to get students, used to writing the constructed response, type writing prompt, that kind of sort of thing. And here's an example that is just, it's social studies content writing, right? We want you to see how these tests item types can be used in varied ways. In this example, I'm assigning my students a raft assignment where they're supposed to pick one of the roles and audience, target audience on the left. I decided in this case on a format for them, and they're supposed to pick one of these topics to write their letter from the perspective of. I gave them the choice of a formal assessment, a formal letter versus an informal letter, depending on their choices. That way, the student who, maybe in an English assignment might get taken off for some of their grammatical errors or things like that. They could feel a little bit safer by picking the informal letter. But they could still get the content out there. So with the new rich text options for constructed response, this is more likely possible, whereas before they just had the kind of straightforward text box. I could get some really meaningful feedback here. And note the line, use your textbook and online resources. I'm not using Lockdown Browser for this online test. I want you to click some extra tabs or open up some new windows, because I want you to be able to get some information from some of the sources that I've shared with you in class or that you're able to find, and use them to document this letter. And so this is one example of a single item test that we could use. I'm going to go all the way to an AP US history. Yeah, this is world history, but this is a US history example. If you look on the left, I have linked 7 resources, all titled Document 1, Document 2. Those are resources from a released AP exam, except I used basic, lorem ipsum text because I wasn't going to type all that stuff out. But those are the resources that are attached to a document-based question. And I want to see how my senior AP students in US history think through the thesis and the defense that they would use for their document-based question. Now, I don't want to do just a thesis every time, like write your full DBQ. So we actually worded this one. We're going to practice. I want to see what your thesis statement is, and I want you to show me what you would write to defend it, but we're not going to spend the full hour doing this. We're going to maybe spend 30 minutes. So this is more of a 30-minute activity where you set up your defense, where you talk about what references you're going to use. You talk about which words from which document you're going to use, but you don't necessarily have to craft it as you would if you were taking the actual AP exam. Remember, an assessment is valid if I can draw conclusions from it. And the conclusions I can draw from this are based on the student's process for how they would approach their DBQ question type on the AP exam. This is an incredibly valuable piece of information. And the rubric I would design for this, for the scale, would be about that process more than about their, grammatical mistakes or things like that. I want to make sure that they're really approaching this from a tactical perspective. On the AP exam, I think they get about an hour for this type of question. And I want to make sure they manage their time properly. Don't spend more than about 15 minutes reading the documents. So this is kind of a more advanced one. And that leads us to a science example that Tara is going to share that I think is along the similar sort of like advanced constructed response.
Yes, I'm super excited to talk to you all about an example of claim evidence reasoning. So here we have Mrs. Patel. She is an elementary science teacher, and she wants to measure how well her students are able to use evidence from a recent lab investigation comparing water ecosystems. So the class has worked in the lab setting to gather some data, and they have built a table that Mrs. Patel has put into Aware as a resource for this assessment. And each student has a little organism card that is describing to them the conditions that their organism needs to thrive, and they need to make a claim of where their organism can live, provide the evidence that supports that claim, and then provide the reasoning. So really rounding their whole idea out. This may be something that Mrs. Patel has been working on as an SLO all year long and has kind of done a gradual release. Maybe we built claims together at the beginning of the year. But now we've really been practicing this. We're at the end of the year, and students are now responsible to independently respond to all 3 parts of this claim evidence and reasoning for this lab. As you can see, the particular student that is going through this is still needing some supports, and that's been provided as a reference document. And so I know a lot of us, we might think of that reference document as being that TEA reference chart that students may use on STAAR. But there's a whole host of ways that we can use that. So one example is sentence stems for this constructed response that students can reference as they are gathering their ideas and putting that down into writing. Once students have submitted this, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just interrupted you. I'll add afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, when students have submitted this, Mrs. Patel is going to be able to use this evidence from this short assessment to measure student learning, determine the next steps for her classroom instruction, and she'll be able to see if students have grown in this process skill over the year. She'll be able to look at her answers and score this using her unique scoring guide for claim evidence reasoning. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to highlight, and I'm sorry I interrupted. I thought that pause, I thought you were done. The annotation, the highlighting, the notes that you can use a little note tool, the add a note. It's not showing in the GIF, but up in the top there, you have the add note option. Students, whether they're doing a STAAR writing composition sort of simulation, we want to get you writing this composition on this 4-point rubric, all the way to that this example here or the document-based question example. The students can actually take those notes in the note feature, or highlight the text that they want to use as a part of their writing. And one of the things that we would love to engage with you guys on is, as you experiment with more varied assessment types and assessment practices, right? We have some folks out there who do a great job in setting up the STAAR-like tests. And we also have some folks out there who do a great job in expanding their local assessment practices into more varied and informal methods. And we'd love to get feedback from all those kinds of practices on what else could help those students, right? So if the students are using the notes feature to annotate, what can make that process better? If the students are writing out like an outline in the space, is there something related to that practice? Because one of the things that we want to do is, as we transfer from more paper-based testing, where you just hand them up, you know, they just write it on some lined paper, they type it up, to this online collection method, it opens up a lot of avenues for us to change the data types that we process and what's exposed to you and what's exposed to your students. So all of that is a lot more words than I meant to say on, we need your feedback on these features and actual use cases. We tried this type of test. This is what worked. This is what we'd love to see, because that's how we make this better.
We absolutely want to hear your feedback, if I can tag team off of that. So any thoughts, anything that you've been thinking about for student supports related to any varying question types, different ways to adhere to paper versus now going virtually, since that has been revealed as well. So we would love, I'm anxious for, you know, I will happily hand out my email and say, please send me some questions and thoughts. Because we're growing in knowledge at the same pace, really, that you are in all of this. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and talk about what's coming soon. So some of the next things that you can expect to see coming down the pipe very soon. The first one is test proctoring. So an administrator will be able to, in the future, proctor an assessment. And we put in there, when a teacher's absent, that's predominantly when this is going to happen with COVID and lots of sicknesses and other things that occur. Test proctoring would be a right that would be allowed to give out to staff members. So you can think through that at this time, who would need that access so that they can actually proctor an assessment when a teacher is gone. So that was definitely a need that came because of COVID and the pandemic. So we have that one coming out in the future. Then we have done a great job today, I think, in revealing that the item bank is going to see some facelifts as well. And so you will see those coming fairly soon. What we are doing right now, you'll see it says beta districts up there. I have worked with a couple districts that we're going to partner with to make sure that the item bank, it is a big in-depth tab within Aware. So we want to make sure that all of the elements work. And so we are beta testing it with districts to make sure that we release a solid product to you. So that one will be coming soon as well. And then you've probably seen very well throughout this presentation that constructed response will also have a facelift, and we'll have a report to go with it. So the constructed response report also came from COVID. There's now a need that you're not having as many paper assessments as you used to. So having a piece of paper to go back and refer to what a student wrote is no longer something that you really have as an option in a lot of cases. So we created a report that you'll see in the future that will allow you to see exactly what students put on these constructed response reports, and some additional details with that. And then in the very bottom, you'll see a picture here of the new rich text that we have with our constructed response, which includes word count, which I know several of you have had questions about word count versus character count and all of those things. We wanted to support teacher best practice, and most teachers are utilizing word count, and there was a lot of technicalities involved with character count as well. And so word count will be the option for you to select moving forward. You'll see here you have bold, italicized, underline. You have bullets, numbers. We also included indent. And then you'll see copy, and paste, and that's going to be restricted to this particular text box. So your students won't be allowed to grab outside content and paste it in here. It will only be content that they have typed themselves. And so we are pretty excited for all of this to be coming out very soon for you to utilize and get a feel for how you can really use some of these constructed response examples that we provided today. I think I haven't looked at questions, but the last piece I really wanted to announce that wasn't in this slide is I did see a question related to graphing calculators. And we just, I believe about a week ago, we just entered into partnership with Desmos. So we will be working with them for a graphing calculator. So that will be coming soon as well. So we will enhance our scientific calculator as well as add the ability for a graphing calculator to be utilized in online testing. So hopefully that addresses some of those. All right, I think I will hand it off to Jenny for some of the final thoughts that we have today.
Can I have you go back just a little bit? I do want to, we have some relevant questions I think could fit right here with this. So for starters, I'd like to address for the first bullet point there, the test proctoring administration impersonation. That one is live in some districts now, and it will be live in some districts over the next few days, probably going into next week. We have a slow release plan for that, and so you can actually manage that feature now. You can start assigning that right. I would encourage you to think very carefully about who's on each campus should gain this right. If you're in a small district versus a large district, if you have elementary campuses with certain needs that are different from high school campuses, just because we use the word administrator here or administration, it's talking about administration of a test. The principal may not be the most appropriate person to give this right to. Who would have the bandwidth in their day to go in and proctor the test for the teacher who's not able to proctor the test that day? That's really the thing. And so the articles that we have about this kind of go into detail about it. And we highly encourage you to think carefully about who this is assigned to. The reason we didn't attach it to a role is because this need varies from one campus to the next and from one district to the next. So we wanted to give you the freedom to say, okay, in this situation, we want these people to have this option. They have tests available for their own tests, and they have the test proctoring administration when this right is assigned. And so I wanted to get that out there. I also wanted to, we had a few questions just kind of talking about what's the timeline. I get it. I want to know when I'm going to have this next item type and this next item type and this next item type. And so while we spent this webinar talking a lot about the constructed response options and the rich text options and how to take that from STAAR and STAAR-like testing to other types of local testing, we want to do this same sort of thing for the other items. We're doing very, very intense heads down research into the best approach for how to support these items, because some of these items have similar interaction types, you know, like drag and drop and hotspots have similar interaction types for the students. And so we're letting our engineers and our design team really kind of take the wheel on saying, let's try this next. And so what we will dedicate, and because, you know, we're not going to put it on a timeline when we're not quite sure what the next best part of this, we will dedicate to communicating to you regularly. So as we possibly in 6 to 8 week intervals, possibly a little bit more frequently, the articles that we've shared and the resource pages that we've shared, we're going to be updating those every chance that we get. So this is where it's super important to watch for newsletters or watch for updates to those articles, because we can tell you when something is in progress. We can say, you know what, this is the thing in progress right now. And we do work with some districts to get information about this or that. One of the things we want to be very, very deliberate on is not just what is the interaction like for the student, but also what does scoring look like? What does data analysis look like? The strength of aware is to be able to take this test and this rubric and this other test and this quiz and put them all next to each other if the data are in aware. And we want to make sure that the scoring and the data analysis for these item types matches expectations for drawing conclusions about student learning. Because if you look at it and at the end of the day can't draw a conclusion about student learning from it, then it decreases the validity of using that item type. And so we're trying to be very deliberate in our conversations about scoring and data analysis.
We appreciate your attendance, and we'll see you soon.